So let's begin. This is a 50-year celebration. If you can go to the next slide, please. 50 years ago, it was a different name. It was called the UFSD of the town of Mount Pleasant. This name change was more for identity purposes more than anything else. We were still independent from the other school district. I'm going to talk a little bit about all the three schools, the different decades and different milestones. It's not a presentation about every accomplishment from every year. It's just a little broad strokes of things that have happened. On the picture on the left is the Bedford Road School. That is where the turf field is right now. So in 2003, the Bedford Road School was built. If you look at the picture to the right, the old school was there. And the reason they did that was because the new building was built when the kids were still housed in the old building in the early 2000s. And then when they were able to move the kids into the new building, then they raised the other old building. Many years ago in the 1990s, a bond vote was turned down for the new Bedford Road School because the community didn't think it was robust enough in terms of what was being done. A couple of different sites were thought about. One, the Henkel's Knives area was thought about being a campus. Two was the Girl Scout location because, again, it was moving locations and not having instruction that was delayed or inconvenient to the kids. Eventually, it was voted on in a May 2000 board meeting that it had passed, and it would be at the same location. It was also the same night that I was appointed to be a sixth grade teacher here at the building. Dr. Antonecki, who was the superintendent, was so happy that it passed. The community was really, it was a joyful night that the Bedford Road School would be built. Some people thought it was difficult because, as you know, there's a hill there, and a lot of elementary schools are not multi-level, but it seemed to work out very nicely by grade level. The middle school was constructed in 1954. Over years, it was called the middle school. It was called the North Campus for a long time. In 67, there were renovations. In 96, there were major renovations. If you think about the 8th grade wing and where the gymnasium is, that was the 96 renovation. And then in 2003, they built the U-shaped building in the back that formed the courtyard of the middle school. So now there's a garden there, there's a koi pond, the nurse's office is back there, and so it became a complete building. Back when I taught in the middle school, my room was near the band and multi-purpose room in the back. The kids used to be able to leave my classroom through the window out to where the current courtyard is and walk home. So they've changed over time. So the middle school now, obviously, 2003 was the last major renovation, and of course this summer we're going under some other renovations in terms of heating and cooling and infrastructure work. The high school, 1929, it was built, just so you know, the first year that kids graduated from the high school was 1904. We celebrated the 100-year anniversary of high school graduates and certificates in 1904. This was built in 1929. It housed students from this area, from Byram Hills and surrounding Valhalla and Westlake for years. In 1974, there was a major addition. A lot of people don't realize this. The current math, science, and the gymnasium were built in 1974. At that time, there was renovations in the building. If you walk through the hallways of the math and science wing, there's a lot of half stairwells, and that happened to be most likely because of blasting and rocks and things of that nature. And then you'll see pictures now that you don't really see the new gymnasium wing because it's integrated with the high school administration wing with the science, so you don't really see the old building. Later on, you will see the old building. And in 2010, there were major renovations to this building. It was a $27 million bond. It was 1/3 for infrastructure. We had boilers in the basement, if you remember the movie Titanic. It was like that, really. It was coal-fired when it was first built. Custodians used to live here 24/7 in a room that's right near the cafeteria, and they would have to put coal into the coal furnace. And then they did infrastructure there. They built this wing, the cafeteria below us, the new science wings, and they renovated every single classroom. This has had a tremendous impact in this building in terms of positive climate and an attitude, and I really can't explain it. I was listening to a podcast this morning, accidentally. It's called Freakonomics, and they were talking about three major things that help schools air quality, temperature, and light. And those three things actually were taken care of when we built this new building in 2010. Okay, please switch. Those are some pictures from the 1973 yearbook. I have the yearbook in front of me here. Yearbooks in the 1970s often had a theme. The 1976 yearbook had that bubble letter, Spirit of 76, and the yearbook was like a denim jeans. If you look at the yearbook. The library has every yearbook going back to the 1940s, if you want to take a look at that. I put some pictures there. I pulled a picture of a young lady. I thought that was synonymous with the 1973 look, and some guys and some girls on the right-hand side with the striped pants and the different kind of outfits. I thought that was interesting from 1973. Interestingly, the yearbook was dedicated to someone by the name of Dick Rote. I knew Coach Rote. He was the football coach, gym teacher, athletic director. Interestingly, they said about Coach Rote, he was a great man and a teacher, and they proudly called him Coach. Pleasantville High School has had 3 football coaches since 1946.
3.
Think about that.
Only 3.
Pete Kurachek, 46 to 73. Coach Rote, 74 to 2004 approximately, or 2003. And Tony Becerra from 2004 till today.
Wow.
Tremendous.
Wow.
Our school play, we've had basically 3 play directors since 73.
Right.
Dr. V, which I'll talk about later, Kathleen Donovan Warren,
Longevity.
and now Miss Rizzo. There was 1 year gap before Miss Warren came, but
Right.
we're not going to count that one. Okay? Let's go next. 1970s. Here are a couple of highlights. Again, we're not going to go through everything. Enrollment was about the same it is now, 1875. We're now around 1635, 1650. Wow. Dr. V, Dr. Valentino, he started the school play excellence program. The auditorium is named after him. At the time, it was really only a band and chorus. We added orchestra years and all types of jazz bands. I read something about 1973. The high school kids would go to the elementary school and work with kids and their teacher aides. That's what we do today. Our students go over there for internships. Longtime friend of ours at the high school and middle school, John Koziel.
I think that's funny.
He started in 1973. He just retired
He's still
last year. He's still around. John Koziel, who lived in the community.
He retired,
raised
but
his
he
family.
still comes back and teaches.
Here's someone. I go back when I was in high school, you received a go-card. Does anyone know what I'm talking about?
A go-card?
You received a go-card that gave you free admittance to school events. We don't really charge anyway.
Funny.
But they gave gold cards to senior citizens in the town in the 1970s that they can come for free. In 1974, course approvals were in computer programming, health and drug education, and materials for classroom learning centers. A major part of my theme is that this happens today as well, same courses. Jerry Solon, another one from the 1970s. He was Mr. Everything. He started there. He was the student council person. He was the math chairperson. He was the voice of the Panthers for 20 years at football games. And I also read something that he broke his foot, and he wasn't able to announce. Does anyone know why? Because at the time at the old football field, you had to climb these staircases behind the old bleachers to get up there. It was a scaffolding staircase, and it was very, very dangerous. Thanks to the community, we built a brand new press box a couple of years ago.
Right.
So he wasn't able to do that. Again, continue to the next slide. 1970s, there was adult education here at night with different various classes. If there was no school for the day due to weather problems, the bell would go off, the fire bell in the morning, and tell kids no school. And they also had the radio.
I love
Roselle Avenue School on the other side of the Sawmill. That was an elementary school. It closed in 1977. That was a contentious time because those kids then would have to be walked over to the Bedford Road School. That was a community-based school. My high school kids now, they still play ball at Roselle School, and there's a playground out there, and they play a lot of basketball there. What else from the 70s? The start of declining enrollments. There was talks in our news and our board meetings and our news and views, talks between the Board of Ed and Briarcliff about potential mergers. We also started in the 80s combining classes with Briarcliff and Pleasantville and having kids travel back and forth. So they had to have the same bell schedule. So kids might go back and forth to take a computer class or a high-level class. It didn't work because the kids would have to miss the previous period and then miss part of the next period. It just didn't work out well. And so those are some of the things. There was also a youth employment service I read about. Today it's a little bit difficult to tell people to go to someone's house and work for them. It's just a lot of liability issues. All right, next one, please. 1980s, pictures of the prom and some intramural champs. In the 80s, Pleasantville did something that no other school did at that time. They mandated that Pleasantville kids go to the prom on a bus.
Yeah, that was in the 80s you started that?
1983 or 4 or 5, I
Wow.
forget, I don't remember the year. That was unheard of. People always went in limousines.
Sure.
And you can think of all the problems that are associated with it. But the best part of the bus that we still continue today is that everyone went together and everyone comes back together. You can't leave early. So there's a real sense of camaraderie. Where in other districts where they take limousines, kids want to leave early, they want to start their weekend, they want to go to different places. So this was a major accomplishment that actually Dr. Antonecki, the superintendent of schools, started, and he received a lot of backlash his first and second year as a principal. And later on, everyone followed him and emulated him for that decision. And then on the right, there used to be a common lunch period in the 80s when declining enrollment. There was one lunch period for the entire school. And they would have intramural competitions and things of that nature and clubs and meetings. All right, next page. 1980s, ADA in buildings, adding elevators and things of that nature. There were field shortages in the 80s. There was renovations. They closed Parkway Field for years. Our varsity football team and baseball had to play somewhere else. Our high school field here was closed for years because of aging of the grass turf, and they had to work on the turf or the grass turf for years. The kindergarten circus started. The class play started. What else? A Board of Education candidate said they're interested in differentiated education, performing to the potential of the students, and a vision of academic excellence. That's the same it is today,
Right.
right? I talked about the prom buses, and I read about the 1980s. Parents were complaining, and the community had to look into there was too much homework for students in 1988. Again, a common thread throughout the years of the school. Let's go on to 1990s, Revolutionary Day. Alan Fennell, I read about, our music teacher extraordinaire. He appeared on the late-night David Letterman show. He was part of a barbershop quartet.
He still is.
Yeah. Pecanico students came to Pleasantville High School for the first time in the 1990s. Pecanico does not have a high school. It's only a K-8 school. They get to choose between 3 schools now: Pleasantville, Briarcliff, and Sleepy Hollow. 5th grade moved from Bedford Road to the middle school, along with the 6th grade, and that was a big transition for a lot of kids. Fun for Learning developed in 1994. Next slide. 2000, a lot of programs going on. Full-day kindergarten started here. Turf fields were put into the high school and middle school field. This is our second turf field that we've had. The first one has a life of about 10 to 12 years. All the edible gardens started in the 3 buildings. And we used to have parent coffees, which were part of like safe rides, Students Against Drunk Driving, part of our Clear Choices program. Parents would hold nighttime meetings about safe choices for kids. All right, let's change to the next slide. Leadership, just going through all the different superintendents, starting with Dr. Dessau. Most recently, goes back to Dr. Henry Versnick, James Finn. I read about him, established warm relationships with the staff and community. Anytime we're looking for a leader in this building, we always include that because it never goes out of style. It's always important, right? Frank Ray led the district for about a dozen years. Dr. Ray was the principal from 84 to 93, 94. He became superintendent. Mary Fox Alter, and of course, Dr. Dessau. Next page. Pleasantville High School stories. Does anyone know the man on the left?
Captain
Who knows the man
Steubing.
on the left?
Captain Steubing.
His name is Alan George C., commonly referred to Gavin McLeod from The Love Boat and from the Mary Tyler Moore Show. He graduated from Pleasantville in the late 1940s,
That's
48 or
interesting.
49. He came back to visit in 86. 1994, that's a view of the high school gymnasium from the street from we go down the road here, before the addition was put on.
God, that was ugly.
On the right, I just saw a great picture I wanted to mention.
Such a
Our
great-
kids had a walkout a couple of years ago about safety in schools.
Yeah.
It was a nice event.
It was a
Real
great
nice
event.
Okay, next. Pictures of
that.
kids' hairstyles. 1990, 1973.
1973, that's kind of coming back.
It is. Facial hair, and I mean, a lot of people with beards are popular again. 1983, my generation, the flip-do. Turn to the next one. 1990s, 2003, a lot of spiked hair and close club, and then 2013. I didn't do this one. Next one. Here's one. That's from the 73 yearbook, the picture on the left. The picture on the right is this summer.
This summer.
It's virtually the same. We redid it, and we renovated it, and we cleaned it up, and patched up some of the dents and bruises, and painted it. It's the same, and that's what makes it wonderful. Turn the page. I just saw some pictures of teachers over time, and I thought I'd mention them. Dennis Walsh was a teacher from the 70s, 80s, and 90s. He was a science teacher. It was not uncommon for Mr. Walsh to find a dead animal on the side of the road and bring it into his classroom in the 70s and dissect the animal in the classroom. Interestingly, he still comes to our football games, and he was at our game at Middletown in one of our state championship games. He still comes to the games. Dr. V is our music person, who was a mainstay in this community. And I just put Mary Elise Blundell because I saw her picture from a yearbook from 10 years ago because she was one of the first people who started to really use technology in the classroom. And I thought that was important.
Well,
She had a smart board in the room. She was one of the first people, and I used to evaluate her instruction. And I couldn't believe it. She would bring things out from the internet and put things in the room and have different science experiments. And now that's just commonplace.
Yeah.
So I thought I would give a tribute to Mary Elise
she was the
Blundell.
environmental
Yeah.
teacher. She was great.
Next page. Who's that woman in 1992?
I don't know who that
First
is.
year of her teaching.
I'm
Who is
teasing.
that? It's Mary Fox Alter. 1992, her first year. Next one. Who is this teacher? Does anyone know from 1992?
Mr. V.
That is correct. I think I had Mary's wrong. I think it was
You know,
1999.
I was trying.
Mark Vavalitsa.
With her.
That's him. I saw him this weekend. I
Now
told him
it's,
he's in
it
my
was funny, I was
presentation.
looking at it, I was like, what is
Right?
that? I was thinking the photo. Yeah.
Dr.
It's
Mark
Mr. V, of course
Vavalitsa.
it
All right,
is.
next one.
Yep, that smile.
Some awards, some Blue Ribbon Awards, Schools of Excellence. Last year we were Blue Ribbon, and other years as well, and Schools of Excellence. Next one. Students 50 years. Just some good pictures of some nice kids. Next picture. Slide. Just pictures over the years from different yearbooks, all the different generations. Okay? And I put this one in here. This is from the 1920s, and my point was, how will we be remembered in 60, 70, 80 years? Go on. Name that tune and the year. Let's think about it. Can you name the tunes with the year? Each 10 year. Every breath you take. By the
That was
Police. What year was that?
1983.
83, you
83.
think?
Tie a yellow
Okay, we'll
ribbon
find out
in
next slide.
2013.
In the club.
73, no.
In the club. Oh,
Anyone in the club? 50 Cent?
Whitney Houston is 1993.
All right. I Will Always Love You, Whitney Houston.
93.
All right. Blurred Lines by Robin Thicke.
13.
And Tie a Yellow Ribbon Around the Old
that's
Oak
gotta
Tree.
be
1970.
All right, let's go to the next one. There we go. Take a look.
Yeah.
I was unaware
Now, it's interesting, if you're from a certain generation, you know that Tie Yellow Ribbon. Does anyone know where you know that song from, and what was the significance in U.S. politics and history in the late 70s? It was...
It had to do with Vietnam veterans, or not veterans,
Correct. It was
but
the hostages of the late 70s that were in Iran, hostages, and people were, for solidarity, people put a ribbon around any tree they had in their home. And that was in reference to the hostages that were kept in Iran, and that was a big deal at that time. Okay, next page. And then here are some things that, although I did a study of 50 years, and I could have gone on for time and time again, and kept on going, some of the constants are good kids, good people, community schools, education, caring people, partnerships. Dr. Cankrell, a longtime principal, had a three-legged stool in his office. And he said, Greg, without the work with the parents as one stool, the community as another part of the stool, and the school district, the stool doesn't stand up. You need all three to stand up straight. And then we've always been about academics, arts, and athletics. And it's interesting, all my studies and all the things I've done, there's always been traffic in front of Pleasantville High School for 50 years. There was an article I read in the 1980s, they made Ashland Avenue behind the middle school, because they brought now 5th and 6th, they made Ashland a one-way street to solve that problem. Well, if you know now, it's back to two-way. So there's always been a traffic problem in every generation at Pleasantville High School and middle school and elementary school. There's always been, Mr. Chow, fiscal responsibility decisions about the budget. You know, we're at a 2% cap. 10, 15 years ago, we were looking at 8, 9, 10% increases in our school budgets countywide.
Right.
And student health and wellness has always been a concern of our district and our Board of Ed. And I hope you enjoyed the presentation.
That's great.
And last slide. And thank
Thank
you
you.
so much. Thank you. Tina,
Did you do 20?
I want 21 minutes. I told her to be under 15.
So great.
It's all right. You know what, you had so much character, so I think you guys can understand why Mr. Fondi was voluntold that he had to do this presentation, because he has the history, but he also brings it to life in such a wonderful way. And I just
Absolutely.
thought it should be a celebration, and thank you very much. I know you had fun, but I also know it was something that I tasked you with to go through and develop the highlights
Yeah.
from the 5 decades of these 50 years.
Absolutely. There's
So
there's
thank
so
you.
much history.
So much
I
history.
remember the Bedford Road bond, I passed by one. By one. And originally, one of the plans, if anybody knows 301 Bedford, that beautiful old house on the corner of Guyon, that was one of the plans, that they were going to buy that property, knock that beautiful old house down, and build the kindergarten wing and have a long walkway from that house, that potential building, to, do you remember that?
I do, that's the one that failed.
That was the one that failed, and it was...
And then the community actually voted that the end result, the school we got,
Yeah.
actually cost more money. It was,
Right.
It was just that people didn't like that plan.
It was a silly, when you think about it.
It wasn't about how much money they were
Right,
spending,
it was-
because they ended up spending more on what we ended up getting.
Right.
And it was a much better solution.
But
You know, it's
it's-
interesting, the Henkel's, it was called MLA building at the time, it served it was a viable option because there would have been room for athletic fields
Yeah.
and places to play. But the community didn't want that because they wanted all 3 schools to be within a block or so of
Within-
each other in a
right.
walking community. If you put the school down there, then you had to deal with traffic situations
Right.
on the road and kids' safety. But that was a real attractive location at
It
the time.
was.
There was also talk of knocking down and buying some properties around the Bedford Road School and making them parking facilities for teachers and people to visit the
Right.
school in that area. The old high school, and even before the high school was built, if you look at old pictures, a lot of pictures were taken, in the front of Bedford Road School. There's a World War II memorial, and there's a large rock on that corner. A lot of the pictures that kids are taking from the 1920s and 30s and 40s are outside that area right
In
there.
that rock.
You know, because the school housed
Right.
most kids. Before the Bedford Road School was built, there were small little schoolhouses for kids at the time.
Yeah. I remember that MLA. There's a committee. We would go around and get and view the different sites. And that MLA building was not a bad idea, because then we would have had that whole entire area. Time.
Cool.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Fondi.
Mr. Fondi.